We should go ahead and start. It's 10 a.m. on the first meeting of the California Road Charge Pilot Program Technical Advisory Committee here on January 23rd, 2015. My name is Jim Madaffer, and I want to welcome all of you here at our inaugural meeting. Before we get started with some of the introductions and everything, what I'm going to do is introduce the Executive Director of the California Transportation Commission, Will Kempton, who will give us some basic housekeeping items and also call the roll. Will?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to everybody. Thank you for participating in the Technical Advisory Committee for a road charge pilot here in California. First of all, I will talk a little bit about some of the housekeeping issues. If you need to use the restrooms, it's out the door to the rear of the chamber and just around the corner, and they are off to the left of the dais in that direction. You'll see them. It's the first right as you exit the area. With respect to your microphones, they are the switch for the microphones is up towards the top of your controls, just to the right of your screen. And if you want to speak and press the speak direction, a little red light will come on, and the chair can know that you desire to speak. And then please turn them off after you're through speaking. Also, the cafe, if you get a little hungry during the course of the meeting, we have provided water at the dais, but the cafe is just beyond the restrooms, again, to the left of the dais here. And from a safety perspective, if there's a fire drill or anything and you need to exit the building, it's out the back door, and there is an exit immediately to the right. So just wanted to give you those sort of housekeeping chores. I think for future meetings, we probably will look for a different arrangement in terms of the structure. We want to be able to encourage discussion among the members of the TAC. This is not necessarily the best setup for that, but for the first meeting it seemed appropriate that we would do something a little more formal. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll call the roll. Chair Madaffer. Present. Senator Bell. Here. Assemblymember Chu. David Finnegan. Here. Stephen Finnegan. Here. Scott Haggerty. Here. Guadam Hans. Here. Lauren Kay. Here. Richard Mark Antonio. Pam O'Connor. Here. Eshwar Pitampalli. Here. Robert Poitras. Here. Eric Sauer. Here. Lee Tien. Here. And Martin Wax. Here. Hopefully I did not butcher anybody's names. With that, Mr. Chair, you have virtually a unanimous participation in the first meeting of the TAC.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And to Assemblymember Chu, only learned of the appointment just the other day, so we certainly excuse him in not being here today. But again, I would like to welcome all of you to our first meeting of this Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee. As you all know, this Technical Advisory Committee was created in law by Senate Bill 1077, signed by Governor Brown just a few months ago. Since then, last fall, the staff of the California Transportation Commission has been hard at work in forming this task force and creating the program that will help guide us in the months ahead. The bill tasks the California Transportation Commission, in cooperation with the California Transportation Agency, to develop and evaluate a pilot program to assess the potential for mileage-based revenue collection as an alternative to the gas tax system. I'm certainly pleased to serve as your chair, and I want to take an opportunity to introduce commission members and staff that will be providing day-to-day support to this committee and ensure that they help us in meeting our objectives and the statutory deadlines. I want to first start by recognizing the Undersecretary for the California State Transportation Agency, Brian Annis, who's here. Thank you very much. The Chair of the California Transportation Commission, Carl Gordino, right there. Wave, Carl. I think everybody knows you. The Vice Chair and the incoming Chair, starting in March, Lucy Dunn. Thank you very much for being here. I certainly have the pleasure of serving with them on the California Transportation Commission. You've already met the new Executive Director to the CTC, Will Kempton, to my left, your right. But somebody who has been helping before Will arrived and really leading the charge, and that's the Chief Deputy Director of the CTC, Susan Branson, who's right there in front of us. Carrie Porvahidi, the Deputy Director, serving as Commission Program Manager. Carrie, thank you so much for all you've done. Lori Pennybaker. Laura has been very much involved. Florence Chu, who's the Associate Accounting Analyst, and then Ann Johnson, who's also Associate Government Program Analyst for the Commission, has been very helpful in getting us rolling so far today. So thank you all for that. Commission staff is going to be responsible for the administration of the committee. They're going to work very closely with Caltrans staff who will be providing technical assistance for our effort. And speaking of Caltrans, I want to recognize and personally thank a number of folks that are here, especially starting with Norma Ortega, who is the Chief Financial Officer for Caltrans, for her leadership in this effort this past year. Stephen Keck, who's the Caltrans Division Chief of Budget. I don't know where Stephen is. There he is in the back. He usually sits in the back. He has the good news of the budget. Can't wait to hear his report. Gary Gutierrez and Brady Tactall, Caltrans program managers. Brady and Gary, where are you? There they are. Thank you very much for your efforts. And as we've seen so much effort going into this, it's been, really increasingly clear, and you're going to hear about it today, that the current gas tax structure in California has really become an ineffective mechanism to meeting California's long-term revenue needs when it comes to transportation. Revenues are steadily declining due to improvements in vehicle fuel efficiency and advancement in fuel technology. And we'll hear today how the federal gasoline tax, last raised in 1994 to 18 cents a gallon, is worth today about 9 cents a gallon when you factor in inflation and vehicle fuel efficiency. And as I've mentioned, we've been tasked to guide the development and evaluation of a pilot program to assess the potential for mileage-based revenue collection as an alternative to the gas tax system. Specifically, we need to study the concept of a road charge as an alternative to the gas tax and ultimately make recommendations to the State Transportation Agency on the design of a pilot program in testing this concept. The work that we're going to undertake over the months ahead are going to be critical to really funding the long-term transportation financing needs for our really underfunded transportation system in California. And as we move through this process of studying road charge alternatives to the gas tax, we're going to need to explore a lot of issues such as privacy, feasibility, security, and each of you bring a unique perspective to the table here. And as Will said, I can't wait till our next meeting where we're all in a circle in a square so we can really, this is not to be a formal, stuffy operation. What we want to do is be able to roll up our sleeves and really be able to have open, fluid conversation. Everybody's input is crucial to this. And along those lines, as many of you guys know, things are really changing rapidly when it comes to the world of the automobile. Despite the current drop in the price of gasoline, in California, we've seen the sales of zero-emission vehicles and hybrid vehicles continue to break records that were only dreamt of before. I use myself as an example. I've been driving an electric car now for over a year, and I'm part of a growing problem. I'm not paying my fair share to support our transportation infrastructure. And at the same time, we're witnessing this zero-emission and fuel-efficient, more and more of these vehicles hitting the road. We're also in the middle of an incredible period where auto manufacturers are researching and developing things like autonomous vehicles. And they're taking baby steps at first, with features such as lane departure warnings, adaptive cruise control, which will maintain spacing between vehicles. But it's not going to be too long before we witness self-driving vehicles, perhaps on the freeways only at first, but as I got the honor of experiencing at Google and Mountain View, completely driverless vehicles. And we have to ask the question, what does that mean for our transportation system and how it relates to how we pay for our transportation? And I certainly predict over the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to see vehicle miles travel go up, and we're going to see GHG emissions go down. And so folks like seniors who were previously denied the ability to drive or to get around, to maybe even the Uber of driverless vehicles, are going to be coming along. All along, we have this antiquated system of paying for our local streets and roads and maintaining our freeways, bridges, is not keeping pace. So that is really the task that we have ahead of us as this task force in developing solutions to fund the future of our transportation network. And we need to be mindful of what we do in California. We'll be closely watched in surrounding states and certainly at the nation's capital as well. And as we move through introductions, which I want to go to next, I want to give each of you an opportunity to kind of share your perspective on this central issue that we've been charged with to study as we provide insight in looking at the opportunities and certainly the challenges that we face in carrying out our duties. So those are sort of my introductory perspectives. Perhaps what we could do is start with you, Eric, and as we kind of go through it, do a little self-introduction and give us some perspective that you see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Sauer, Vice President of Policy and Government Relations for the California Trucking Association. I'd like to thank everybody for allowing CTA to participate in the discussion. The California Trucking Association is looking forward to participating in this discussion and all other future discussions on the development of a road user charge or other types of mileage-based fees. Our members feel strongly that before we implement a new broad-based vehicle tax, we should study how the tax would be implemented in the goods movement sector. California's commercial trucking industry is very diverse due to the various economic forces at play in our state. For example, agricultural hauling is very different from the long-haul applications you may see on the highway system. How a potential new tax or fee would work across all applications in our industry is an important concern. In order to accomplish this, we have volunteered our expertise to the state so that we can partner on this venture. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Robert.
Yes, I'll take this one. I'm microphoneless, so no, that's fine. I'm Rob Poitras, and I'm the mayor of Madera, as well as the chairman of the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council. I represent an 8-county region of Council of Governments and transportation agencies. We represent about 4 million people. A few days ago, I was in a meeting with the Strategic Growth Council, and I mentioned that our area has 23 of the 30 recognized disadvantaged communities in the state of California, and it's probably not a position it's like to brag about, but it's one of those things that issues that we face, as well as communities without drinking water and high poverty rates and so forth. And so we're going to take those issues in consideration, as well as being the #1 agricultural state in the nation. Certainly, the San Joaquin Valley region is the center of that activity. So we'll be looking at the communities and how it affects agriculture as well as goods movement. And Mr. Chairman, I think you said it best in your introductory remarks. So I'll. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate.
Thank you very much, sir. Ishwar Pidampalli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Ishwar Pidampalli. I'm presently with Open Mobile Alliance. Prior to that, I was with Bell Laboratories, a world-renowned research institution, for 30 years. And during this 33-plus years of my experience, I've been associated with telecommunications, and my special domain or specialty is in wireless. I was one of the architects for 3G and 4G, which you call LTE today. And lately, I've been evangelizing machine-to-machine, Internet of Things, and connected car services. And that's what I bring to this board. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you for being here. Pam O'Connor from Santa Monica.
Hi there. I'm on the Santa Monica City Council and a member of the Regional Council of SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments. And first of all, I want to note that we have a great bench of women out there. But committee members, I'm going to call this Pam and the boys, by the way. So, really? Yeah, because I'm holding down. But I need my women out there. Strong bench of women. And Lucy, too. So on that note, though, SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, I'm on the Regional Council, and SCAG is the largest metropolitan planning organization in the country. We're 191 cities, we're 6 counties, 18 million people. And one of the things I'm really proud about is that when we undertook our Sustainable Community Strategy Regional Transportation Plan in 2012, we put a vehicle miles traveled fee in as the concept of going forward how things would be funded. We said at this point, this is further out. We don't know exactly, can't tell you the details, but we think this is the way to go. And I was really pleased. We got a unanimous, by the way, adoption of that. So now this is going to be exciting as we start talking about what are the nuts and bolts, what are the issues. They're complicated issues. That's why you have the range of expertise here, and I'm truly looking forward to working with the guys up here.
Thank you very much, Pam, and we'll do better next time on the diversity. Supervisor Finnegan.
Thank you.
I'll be in control.
Just keep your finger on that button.
There we go. All right, thanks. My name's Dave Finnegan. I am a supervisor from Delaware County, also a member of their local transportation commission. I've had a little bit of experience going through the chairs representing both the Regional Council of Rural Counties, RCRC, here in California, as well as the State Association of CSAC, the State Association of Supervisors. So I'm happy to be here because hopefully what I bring to the table is going to be the rural perspective. Some of the questions that need to be asked from the point of view that either to validate the assumptions that are out there or to question those assumptions that are out there. And do, in fact, rural residents log more miles traveled on public thoroughfares than non-rural residents? Do the rural drivers tend to use the heavier trucks? And if so, probably less on the gas mileage there, so they're paying a higher proportion, and do, in fact, those trucks do more damage to the roads? How do we ensure the security of the information, especially in areas where maybe GIS doesn't work? Make sure that the information we gather it's transparent, it ensures privacy, but it's also reliable. What should be the mechanisms to track those motorists? To where maybe in rural counties only 80% of the travel is done on the state roads or the county roads, but there's a private component and that is not paid for through this gas tax. And then most importantly, how do we ensure enough participation in the pilot project from rural motorists to ensure that the appropriate data is gathered? So that's hopefully part of the issues that I'm going to bring to the table. And thank you very much for allowing me to be on this very esteemed and well-rounded group.
Thank you very much, Dave. Marty Wax.
This is Martin Wax. I have been a researcher and a teacher in the University of California system in transportation economics and finance approaching 50 years. And my specialization in research has been transportation finance. So I've done studies on the motor fuel tax, on sales taxes that are now so common around the state to support transportation. And I've been working on mileage-based user fees or road user charges for the last several years. I was absolutely thrilled that the legislature wrote into the language of the bill that research had to be represented on the panel, and I'm delighted to participate. I know I have a lot to learn from the rest of you, and I look forward to it.
Thank you very much, Professor. And we'll go to Senator Jim Bell. Yep.
Jim Bell, I'm chairman of the Senate Transportation Housing Committee. I'm also on the Budget Committee, the Revenue Taxation Committee, the Appropriations Committee. So I deal with finance quite a bit in my role. They gave me all the finance committee. I think I'm the only senator on all the finance committees. So I think this is a very important topic. The $59 billion deficit in state facilities and probably an equal amount in local facilities or more is astounding. And we have to get our collective acts together as soon as possible. I think I almost voted against this bill because I thought it took too long. Because as we wait the 4 years, the deficit would grow like $20-30 billion in road maintenance deficits. So I think there's some work in the legislature to do in a bridging the gap between now and the time we finish our work and get going. So I think there's still that gap that we have to kind of not let the deficit get any worse. So as we go along, we might bear that in mind. Urgency is important. We have to have a sense of urgency.
Thank you very much, Senator. Steve Finnegan from AAA.
Great. Thanks so much. And I would like to thank the CTC for appointing me to this group and appointing AAA to the group. I'm Steve Finnegan. I do represent the Auto Club of Southern California and AAA and road users on this committee. And I think this is such a vitally important issue. Having a well-maintained, well-functioning, efficient transportation system is vital for California's economy. It's important for our quality of life. It's important for all Californians. And getting the funding for that and paying for that in the right way longer term is important as well. So I look forward to participating on this. The authorizing legislation, 1077, had a number of issues that this committee needs to address. There are no doubt other issues. And one of the important things that this committee needs to do, I think, is to look at all of those issues, identify the right things to be exploring as we look into this issue, and also to have good communication. And I think communication is going to be vital, both communication out of this effort, informing people of what's going on, but also two-way communication, hearing what Californians are interested in, what they're concerned about, what they want, what they don't want. And I think that's an important role that this committee will have, and I look forward to playing a good part in that.
Thank you very much, Steve. And I should advise the task force that I asked Steve if he would serve as vice chair of this task force, and he's agreed. So thank you very much for doing that. With that, let me go to Supervisor Scott Hagerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very honored to be here, especially with the colleagues that I see here. I know some of them from other boards that I sit on, and I'm extremely happy to be here. I've been on the Board of Supervisors for 18 years now, and 14 of those years I've served as the member of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, in which I've wrestled with many ways of how to fund transportation projects that are vital to the economy and goods movement and just the overall quality of life for people. So I was lucky enough to be congratulated by Will Kempton a couple minutes ago for recently passing a half-cent sales tax measure in Alameda County with over 70% of the voters approving this measure. This will raise about $6.8 billion over the next 30 years and employ about 150,000 people. But even though we have that and the VLF, which is also raising about $10 million, I realize that clearly there has to be other options because the infrastructure seems to be crumbling faster than we can rebuild it. I also feel like I'm part of the problem because in my district we have Tesla. I worked very hard to bring Tesla. As a member of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, I've also worked very hard to put in electrical facilities for charging facilities. And so I feel like now we have to figure out how to deal with these electric cars that they're moving around the community. So with that, I look forward to the work. I'm anxious to get moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. Gautam Hans.
Hi, I'm Gautam Hans. I'm an attorney with the Center for Democracy and Technology, which is a nonprofit research, advocacy, and policy organization based in the District of Columbia, but I work out of San Francisco. And as an attorney with the specialty in privacy and civil liberties law and policy, I'm excited to sort of discuss these issues, especially given the both importance of maintaining infrastructure and ensuring that it's maintained and funded appropriately, but also to protect drivers and Californians as consumers regarding the sensitive information that can be collected through any kind of automobile tracking or location information. But I'm excited to work on these issues and hopefully propose a solution that will both ensure the safety and robust nature of the infrastructure while protecting Californians.
Thank you very much, sir. Lauren Kay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Lauren Kay. I'm president of the California Foundation for Commerce and Education. We're a think tank that's affiliated with the California Chamber of Commerce. And I want to thank the Commission for appointing us to this body. This is something that we're very strongly interested in, and it's a privilege to be part of these discussions. I also want to do a shout out to the administration, to the governor for seeing this through, for signing the legislation, and for speaking out for the governor himself speaking out in his inaugural address as to the importance of addressing the California transportation finance problem. Having that leadership from the top is really important, and is, I think, really empowers what this group can do, and I think we should take that as a very strong message of endorsement for addressing the problem. I don't know that he has a particular solution in mind, but maybe that's what our role is. We see this transportation finance and the lack thereof as quite honestly, as a choke point in the California economy, and it's something that if we don't address it, and if the state doesn't address it, the legislature and the governor, then we will fall further behind than we are already. So we look forward to rolling up our sleeves and getting down to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Lee Tien.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Lee Tien. I'm a senior staff attorney with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We are basically focused on issues like privacy, surveillance, and intellectual property freedom for consumers in the digital age. And, you know, we're very, very interested in transportation-related policy issues because they have so many privacy and security implications for the average person. One of the notable things about, you know, the gas tax as a revenue generator is that it has zero privacy implications for anyone. You can raise the money without having to know where someone traveled, when they were driving, and what they were doing. Everything that we begin to talk about as substitutes for gas tax begin to take us down a different road, one that aggregates or threatens to collect more information about people's everyday travel and transportation habits. And that's something that EFF as a group, and I think most consumers and drivers would prefer not to see. We deal with location and tracking issues in the area of automated license plate readers, in event data recorders, connected vehicles and V2V, fast track, you name it. As we have added more technology into these processes, we have radically increased the amount of data gathering about what people do. And we think that in California, where we have under Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, a right that applies to both governmental and to private sector entities, a very, very clear warning in state policy to combat the aggregation and accumulation of personal details about people. So, it's with that sort of philosophy that I come to this group, hoping to protect and make sure that the individuals who drive in California and who are going to be contributing their fair share to protecting and maintaining the highways do not have to give up their privacy either because of law enforcement uses of data or because of commercial uses of data. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lee. And ladies and gentlemen, there you see definitely the incredible diversity that this task force brings with perspectives across the board. So I think that we're going to have a very good discussions, I'm sure, as I said, in the months ahead. And we're going to get into the bill. But before we do, Mr. Kempton has a few more housekeeping items to apprise us of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I neglected to tell everyone that this meeting is being webcast. And anyone wanting to access the webcast can do so through the Commission's website at www.catc.ca.gov. And then finally, with respect to public comments, on the agenda there is a procedure described. Anyone attending the meeting who wishes to address the committee on agenda or non-agenda items may fill out a form, which I believe is in the back of the room, and bring it to the staff off to my left here. They will provide us with that information so that we can acknowledge you during any particular item on the agenda, or you may speak on item 10 today as part of public comment. And so I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Will. So to kind of get us started, let's start off with an overview of Senate Bill 1077. And so Deputy Director Carrie Porviti is going to present us an overview of the bill, which is the enabling legislation that established this technical advisory committee and directing us to study and develop the recommendations for the pilot program. So, Carrie.
Thank you, Chair Madaffer. Included in your book items was a copy of Senate Bill 1077. I hope you had an opportunity to peruse that language. The impetus behind the creation and enactment of SB 1077 was multifaceted. The legislature considered the critical nature of an efficient transportation system plays in the state's economy and quality of life, and acknowledged the revenues currently available. Thank you. No, okay. Sorry. Yeah. And acknowledged that the revenues currently available for our transportation system are woefully inadequate to preserve and maintain the existing system, and are insufficient to improve service and reduce congestion. The current mechanism for generating revenue for transportation system, based on an excise tax, which has not kept pace with inflation, has resulted in a steady decrease in revenue. This diminished revenue is compounded by automobiles becoming more fuel efficient and the proliferation of alternative fuel vehicles. SB 1077 has a number of mandates directed at the California Transportation Commission, the Technical Advisory Committee, and the California State Transportation Agency. Specifically, the formation of the Technical Advisory Committee, which I'll be calling TAC, has placed with the Commission Chair in consultation with the Secretary of the Transportation Agency. The TAC, once formed, is tasked with the examination of the road charge alternative to the existing gas tax method through an open and transparent forum. At the conclusion of the study, the TAC will prepare and submit recommendations on the design of a pilot program for the road charge to the Secretary of Transportation. Additionally, the TAC can develop recommendations on the criteria to evaluate the pilot program. Throughout the examination of the alternatives, the TAC will consult with highway users and transportation stakeholders, which include representatives of vehicle users, vehicle manufacturers, and fuel distributors. To fulfill this statutory responsibilities, SB 1077 has directed the TAC will be supported by Commission staff and may request the Department of Transportation to assist in work necessary to carry out the TAC's duties and responsibilities. Once the pilot program recommendations are submitted to the Transportation Secretary, the Transportation Secretary must implement a pilot program no later than January 1st, 2017. This pilot program should have the ability to identify and evaluate issues to implementation to the road charge program in California. At the conclusion of the pilot program, the Transportation Secretary will submit a report of its findings to the TAC, to the California Transportation Commission, and the appropriate fiscal and policy committees of the legislature no later than June 30th, 2018. And the Transportation Commission will include recommendations on the pilot program in its annual report to the legislature, which is due December 15th, 2018. An overarching theme that needs to be part of the TAC's discussions and deliberations is the privacy and data security issues. SB 1077 explicitly states that the exploration of an alternative revenue sources shall take privacy implications into account, especially with regard to location data. The Technical Advisory Committee consists of 15 members. Pursuant to SB 1077, the Commission Chair considered individuals from the committee who represented telecommunications industry, highway user groups, the data security and privacy industry, privacy rights advocacy organizations, regional transportation agencies, members of the legislature, national research and policy-making bodies, and other relevant stakeholders as determined by the Chair. In order to identify organizations and individuals that represented a broad-based membership, the Commission staff consulted with individuals representing the legislature, Caltrans, regional transportation agencies, and other interested stakeholders. Staff shared the information gathered with the Commission Chair, who consulted with the Transportation Secretary. Upon agreement between the Chair and the Secretary, prospective members were contacted contacted to solicit participation on the committee, and the Commission took action to formally appoint each member of the TAC. Pursuant to SB 1077, there are three primary responsible parties in the development and implementation of the Road Charge Program: the California Transportation Commission, the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee, and the Transportation Agency. The California State Transportation Commission's role is, as I've stated, the establishment of the TAC through consultation with the Secretary of Transportation. Upon completion of the pilot program, the Commission will review the report prepared by the Secretary of Transportation and make recommendations to the Legislature through an issuance of the Commission's annual report. The TAC's role in the development and evaluation of the pilot program through an open and transparent process, resulting in recommendations on the design and evaluation criteria of the pilot program for submittal to the Secretary of Transportation. The TAC is required to study alternatives, gather public comment, design a pilot program, and develop evaluation criteria. In studying the alternatives to the current gas tax system and developing recommendations on the design of the pilot program to test alternative road charge approaches, the committee is required to consider the following: the availability, adaptability, reliability, and security of methods that might be used in recording and reporting highway use; the necessity of protecting all personally identifiable information used in the reporting highway use; the ease and cost of recording and reporting highway use; the ease and cost of administering and the collection of taxes and fees as an alternative to the current tax system; effective methods of maintaining compliance; the ease of re-identifying location data even when personally identifiable information has been removed from the data; the increased privacy concerns when location data is used in conjunction with other technologies; and public and private agency access, including law enforcement to data collected and stored for purpose of the road charge to ensure individual privacy rights are protected. The California State Transportation Agency role is in the implementation of the pilot program that identifies and evaluates issues related to the execution of the road charge program in the state and reporting findings to the TAC, the Commission, and the Legislature. In the execution of the pilot program, the California State Transportation Agency must, at a minimum, analyze alternative means of collecting road charge data, including at least one alternative that does not rely on vehicle location data; collect a minimum amount of personal information, including location tracking information necessary to implement the road charge program; and ensure that processes for collecting, managing, storing, transmitting, and destroying data are in place to protect the integrity of the data and safeguard the privacy of others. Additionally, the California State Transportation Agency shall not disclose, distribute, make available, sell, access, or otherwise provide for another purpose personal information or data collected through the road charge program to any private entity or individual unless authorized by court order as part of a civil case, by a subpoena issued on behalf of the defendant in a criminal case, by search warrant, or in aggregate form with all personal information removed for purpose of academic research. At the conclusion of the pilot program, the California State Transportation Agency must prepare and submit a report of findings to the TAC, the Commission, and the Legislature. This report shall include, but is not limited to, the discussion of all the following: cost, privacy, including recommendations regarding public or private access, including law enforcement to data collected and stored; jurisdictional issues; feasibility, complexity, acceptance, use of revenues; security and compliance, including the discussion of processes and security measures necessary to minimize fraud and tax evasion; data collection technology, including a discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of various types of data collection equipment and the privacy implications and considerations of the equipment; the potential for additional driver services, and the implementation issues. This slide depicts the organizational relationships in the development and implementation and reporting of the pilot program. The Technical Advisory Committee, mandated by SB 1077 and established by the Commission and in consultation with the Transportation Secretary. The TAC is supported through Commission staff and Caltrans staff and consultants. Throughout the discussion and deliberative process, the TAC will consult with highway users, groups, and transportation stakeholders, as well as the general public in the preparation of the pilot program. The TAC will prepare and submit recommendations to the California State Transportation Agency, whereupon the State Transportation Agency will implement the pilot program no later than January 1st, 2017, reporting back to the TAC, the Commission, and the Legislature by June 30th, 2018, and finally closing the loop, with the Commission submitting recommendations on the road charge program to the Legislature through the annual reporting process due in December 2018. The statutory deadlines specified in SB 1077 mandate the pilot program be implemented no later than January 1st, 2017, with the reported findings by the State Transportation Agency no later than June 30th, 2018. And the Commission recommends recommendations on the pilot program to the Legislature by December 15th, 2018. Over the next 12 months, the TAC will examine alternatives, gathering public comment and consulting with highway user groups and transportation stakeholders, preparing and submitting a pilot program, design recommendations, and evaluation criteria. In 2016, the California State Transportation Agency will use this year to conduct pre-implementation system development, procurement, public outreach, and enrollment of participants in the rollout of the pilot program. Over the next 18 months, the California Transportation Agency will implement the pilot, identifying and evaluating any implementation issues, while culminating into a report to the TAC, Commission, and the Legislature by June 30th, 2018. The Commission will review the pilot program and implementation report and will formulate and submit recommendations to the Legislature in December of 2018. While the heavy lifting of the TAC is primarily over this next calendar year, the role of the TAC will not be diminished. During the period of pre-implementation activities, the TAC will be monitoring progress and may be called upon to address any issues that arise that may require adjustments to the pilot program recommendations. Additionally, the TAC will remain the conduit for public discussion on the road charge pilot program. During the pilot program implementation phase, the TAC will continue to monitor the program as well as continue the public forum for discussion. The TAC will be called upon to review the finding report submitted by the Transportation Secretary and provide comments to the Commission. This is a lot of information to digest. That's the conclusion of my formal presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions or...
Does anybody have any questions, Carrie, at this point, or should we just keep right on rolling along? All right. Thank you. That is outstanding. As you could see from that very comprehensive report, staff has been busy working on helping us along as we move with our charge. And so that being said, now that we've got kind of an understanding of the framework of SB 1077, our next agenda item, number 4, kind of gives us an opportunity to review the mission as well as some of the procedures to which we will carry out our responsibility. So the first item we have is what we'll call our mission statement. And this is something that certainly if anybody on the TAC wants to change it or make tweaks to it, we're always open to it, but we thought we would start out with something that made sense for everybody and put that slide up. It's through an open forum, identify and design an equitable gas tax replacement pilot program that examines a potential sustainable funding solution to meet California's transportation system needs. So that's kind of the basis to which we would operate, and we are certainly able to tweak that as we go along. But to get us started, that would be the mission statement that we could focus on, and from there what we'll do is unless there's any comments on that, we can go right into the operating procedures, and Laura Pennybaker can give us an overview of the operating procedures. We're always happy to come back and review this, and perhaps as we get into some open discussion today, this is something that we could focus on, because we've heard so many different nuances of this. So, Laura, why don't you get us started with some of the operating procedures for our consideration?
Thank you, Chairman Affer. Committee members, if you turn to tab 4B in your packet, these are draft committee operating procedures for your consideration. These procedures will serve as ground rules for the committee as it undergoes its process to formulate recommendations on pilot program design and evaluation. Staff would like to propose a clarifying amendment to operating procedure number 4, located on page 1. This procedure addresses committee participation, and staff proposes to modify the last sentence of this provision to read, "Due to the compressed schedule for the development of the pilot program, any member missing 3 meetings will be removed from the committee, at the discretion of the chair." Staff asks that you provide feedback regarding any additional changes or clarifications that may be needed, and recommends your approval of the operating procedures as amended.
So that would actually be an action item for us to adopt those procedures. We'll be as informal as we can, but that's one of those things where we should have a motion, a second, and all right. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the operating procedures?
I don't know if I can do that.
Well, and the little caveat to the discretion of the chair was actually added to the deference to our legislative members, because we understand they do have very busy schedules, and while Senator Bell is endeavoring to be here on Fridays as we look forward, we need to obviously make sure that Assemblymember Chu is excused if for some reason he's not able to meet those requirements. But the rest of us, we all have to be here. How's that? It's too important of an issue, and there's too few of us, and you each bring an important piece to the table that needs to be considered. So we have a motion and a second on the revised operating procedures. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstains? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll go now into the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, and counsel to the California Transportation Commission is George Spanos, and he's going to give us a quick overview of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, which governs the meeting process of the committee to ensure transparency and the opportunity for public comment. Mr. Spanos.
I don't know, is this on?
You're on. You're on the air.
Okay, as Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name, as indicated, is George Spanos. I'm legal counsel to the Transportation Commission. I'm here to make some brief remarks concerning, or make a brief presentation concerning the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, which, as the name implies, deals with open government and open meetings. Those of you who serve on or have served on local bodies such as city councils, boards of supervisors, and so forth are undoubtedly familiar with the Brown Act. The Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act is basically the same, articulates the same policy, but at the state level, for state-level entities, which this committee is a state-level entity. There are some technical differences between the Brown Act and the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. But the main thrust and the basic fundamental purpose of both is the same, which is to make meetings open to the public, to give the public an opportunity to know what their various representatives are doing, and also to give the public an opportunity to participate. You've been given a copy of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. It should be in your packet. It was posted also on the Internet. Much of it does not apply or will not apply to this committee. For example, there are provisions dealing with the Gambling Control Commission and closed sessions that it can engage in. Obviously, that's completely irrelevant. There are some highlights to the law that I prepared that are posted and should be in your packet as well, so I'm not going to repeat all of that. I did want to point out that generally as is I think true for most laws, there is common sense behind this in terms of how the Act is structured. For example, the notice requirement is there in order to make sure the public knows that a state body is having a meeting. There's a requirement that the agenda also be provided to the public so the public knows what is going to be talked about, and that there's a practical purpose there. It's to allow a member of the public an opportunity to decide whether to attend the meeting and hear what's going on, to know whether there is something on the agenda that is of interest to that member of the public. There is also there is a prohibition, and I discussed it in what's in your packet, of a prohibition of circuitous methods around the Open Meeting Act provisions. Some of these provisions, I think, were added to the law to basically codify interpretations that the Attorney General's office had made of the Open Meeting Act, or of the Brown Act, for that matter. For example, the law prohibits a majority of the members of the state body from engaging in what has been called a serial meeting. Serial spelled with an S and not with a C. For example, to take this type of body into account, you have 15 members, 8 is a majority. If 3 of you were to get together over coffee and discuss an issue that is within your subject matter jurisdiction and kind of started to form a consensus, and then one of those 3 people then got together for cocktails with 4 other members and had a discussion about the same thing and communicated to those other 4 the views that had been expressed and the consensus that had developed in the discussion over coffee, including or involving the 3 members. Now you have 7 people involved, and if one of those 4 gets on the phone and calls one of the other members of the committee who is absent at the first 2 functions and discusses and tells that person, what happened and what the views are that are emerging, and through that process some sort of a consensus is formed, that would involve, in a sense, a meeting that is not authorized by the Act and is, in fact, prohibited. You can see how difficult it might be to try to rein that in. Another type of meeting that is referenced, or gathering, I should say, that is referenced in the Open Meeting Act and prohibited is one which involves communications through an intermediary that ultimately involve a majority of the body. And you can imagine, for example, a wheel with the hub and the spokes. That person at the hub might be a member of the body, might not be a member of the body at all, might just be a private citizen. But if communications pass through that person and those communications inform members of the body of the views and comments or attitudes of other members, that process could involve, in effect, an unauthorized meeting. So these are some things that I think the Attorney General in previous opinions have pointed out in interpreting the 2 open meeting laws, Brown Act and Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, in which are now codified. That's all I'm going to say about the Bagley-Keene Act per se, although there is a provision that's pointed out in the materials that indicates that when materials, written materials, and that's defined broadly, are distributed to all or a majority of the members of the body relating to an agenda item, that those materials become subject to the Public Records Act and can be disclosed or should be disclosed on request. Finally, I will leave you with this thought. The beginning and the end of any analysis of the open meeting law, the Open Meeting Act, and whether a particular practice is appropriate or not, should begin and end with considering by considering the policy of the Act, which is stated in the Act itself. In terms of the language in the first section of the Act, it states, among other things, that the intent of the law is that actions of public bodies be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly, and that the people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. So if you begin and end your analysis with that thought in mind, common sense will, I think, clarify most questions that might otherwise arise. With that, I will be happy to conclude my remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spanos. Any questions of the CTC Council? Thank you so much, and we do note that he has written materials that are included in our backup material. And speaking of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, what I failed to do on adopting our operating procedures is I did not state that Supervisor Finnegan was the maker of the motion and Supervisor Haggerty, I believe, was the seconder, and so we'll let the record reflect that in the action. And moving on to item 4D, we'll now turn to Laura Pennybaker, who is our commission staff, and she's going to give us a draft of the 2015 meeting schedule for committee consideration.
Thank you. So now that we've talked about why we're meeting, the open and transparent context in which we must meet, we get to talk about when we will meet. So item 4D is a draft meeting schedule for your consideration. These 2015 dates have been developed to coincide with regularly scheduled commission business meetings, and meetings will be held around the state to ensure ample opportunity for stakeholder engagement statewide. It has recently come to staff's attention from member feedback that Fridays would be potentially a more convenient day for this committee to meet, rather than Wednesdays and Thursdays as proposed in the draft schedule. That being said, staff recommends that the committee set Thursday, February 26th, here in Sacramento as the next meeting date and location, as this date has the least amount of member conflicts at this time. Staff also recommends, however, that the committee adopt the 2015 meeting schedule to reflect the Fridays of the weeks proposed from March to the end of the calendar year as the meeting days for the rest of the year. We're happy to take any questions or get any feedback.
Any questions, comments, or otherwise regarding our meeting schedule? I believe everybody was polled by staff, and Friday seemed to be the date that worked best, and I know Senator Bell indicated the same for him. So we'll entertain a motion to approve our schedule.
Move the item, Mr. Chair, but I'd note when you get to the Bay Area, I'd be happy to host that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
It's on transit, so it'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you, Supervisor Haggerty. Who's the second? Ms. Sauer. Okay. Second from Eric Sauer. Any other discussion or comments? And yeah, we do plan to hop around the state. There's no question about it. We've kind of got our schedule bolted on to the CTC schedules, where CTC will be, but there may be times where we want to do meetings in other parts of the state. We may want to hold workshops. That's, again, all up to you all as to what we do. This is your task force, and we will make adjustments as necessary. Hearing no other comments, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And now what we're going to do is go to item 5 on the agenda. And with that is the Division Chief of Caltrans Budget, Stephen Keck, and he's going to give us an overview. This is kind of the Debbie Downer part of the meeting. He's going to give us an overview on how revenues are currently generated for transportation improvements in the state. And he's going to share with us how trends in fuel consumption that I was alluding to earlier have contributed to decreasing revenues to our current state of underfunding. So with that, Mr. Keck.
Thank you, Chairman Daffer, and thank you, committee, for having me come today to talk about transportation funding. I've been the Division Chief of Budgets, or the Chief Budget Officer of Caltrans, for about 5 years now. I've worked in this area at Caltrans for 15 years. So I have about as much history in this as anyone at Caltrans, and I'm very pleased to share that with you today, especially given the purpose of this, which is really to get us all on the same page as we move forward towards creating a replacement for what is really a very antiquated way of doing business. Some of this information I'm going to go over may be familiar to a lot of the panel members already, but I think there's definite value into going through it again for everyone to be on the same page moving forward. And what I'm going to start with then is really just a brief overview of excise taxes on gasoline. In California, we fund almost all of our transportation projects with an excise tax on gasoline and diesel. An excise tax is a tax per unit of sale, not on the value of a sale. So in this case, we are collecting a tax on a gallon of gasoline sold. We collect different taxes for gasoline and diesel. On gasoline, there is a federal excise tax of 18.4 cents that the state collects and remits to the Federal Highway Administration. there is an 18-cent per gallon base excise tax on gasoline that the state collects and deposits into state coffers for transportation uses, and that is also shared with local agencies. Since the early 1970s, the state has collected sales tax on gasoline, and in 2010, that sales tax was converted to what we call a price-based excise tax. And that price-based excise tax is adjusted annually by the Board of Equalization to maintain revenue neutrality with the sales tax that it replaced. That's a tricky complication. It certainly doesn't make my job easier when I have to explain this to folks. But in terms of collecting taxes on gasoline, especially on gasoline, all of the taxes that we collect that are used for transportation are excise taxes. So it's based on the gallons of gasoline sold. Diesel is a little bit different. There is a federal excise tax of 24 cents on diesel and a state base excise tax of 11 cents on diesel. And unfortunately, it looks like the slide, I apologize for this, the slide has left off the fact that we do still collect sales tax on diesel, which is used for transit purposes. It is actually deposited into a different account, the public transportation account, and is used for transit purposes and also shared with local transit agencies. There's going to be a lot more on this tax structure as I go through this, so don't despair if it doesn't make sense just yet. Excise taxes, though, have been the basis for funding transportation in California since 1923. I think Jim is probably going to say, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but Oregon was the first state to have an excise tax. California followed along a couple of years later with our first excise tax in 1923, and that excise tax was 2 cents. In the intervening decades, there has been action to increase that tax only 6 times. The last action was in 1990 with Proposition 111, which increased the tax at that time to 15 cents a gallon, and then there were 4 more years of 1 cent increases tied with Proposition 111. And the gas tax rate for the base excise tax has been at 18 cents for just over 21 years now. If you want to look at the chart and do math, but you don't have to because I'll tell you, that is the longest period between gas tax increases that we've seen since the first gas tax in 1923. This is a little bit to help understand, again, all the components of the taxes and how those taxes are used. In this case, it's 2 twin pie graphs that show the collection of all the taxes on gasoline and how they're used. Again, this is the 50,000 foot level. The components of the gasoline, as I mentioned on the first page, we have the base excise tax of 18 cents, has been that rate for 21 years. The price-based excise tax, which this year also happens to be 18 cents. It was higher last year. It will be lower next year because it is adjusted annually by the Board of Equalization to kind of keep pace with the price of gasoline. But it's still an excise tax. There's the federal excise tax at 18.4 cents. It's not a tax that we set, but it is collected by the state for the feds. It's been at that rate for over 20 years as well. And then a part that I'll mention here, and you probably won't see much about it later on, there is still local sales tax collected on gasoline. I generally leave it off the slides because it gets rather confusing to talk about this tax. This tax goes directly to local governments. It's not part of the state distribution, but it is part of what you pay at the pump. And then in terms of uses of these tax revenues, about 9% of the tax revenue is used for debt service on transportation bonds. About 43% comes to the state to manage the state highway system and also to provide assistance to local roads through the local assistance program. 32% goes directly to local transportation uses. And then this local general sales tax piece that's equivalent to the collection on the left-hand chart goes to local coffers for, in some cases, use for transportation and in other cases not. And that 10% is an average. It varies. I'm sorry, that 10 cents per gallon is an average. It varies depending on what county and sometimes what city you're in. So again, complicated issue, but what we're talking about is those 3 base excise taxes in general, because that's what funds transportation in California. So when you go to the pump and you're looking at paying for a gallon of gasoline, this is generally what it looks like, and I'm comparing today's gasoline on the right with gasoline that you might have purchased in 1994, the last time the gas tax was increased. In 94, your prices were just over $1 a gallon, and it included 18 cents state base tax, and it's actually 18.4 cent federal excise tax, but dollars don't show up in 3 digits. And then at the time, the sales tax on gasoline was 7 cents because it was only $1 to buy gas back then. On the right-hand side, I have to revise this chart every week these days because the price of gasoline, of course, is dropping on a weekly basis. The keynote here is that those federal and state excise taxes, the bases, have not changed in the 21 years, and the price-based taxes increased from 7 cents to 18 cents. Basically, as a percentage of the gasoline price, in 1994, all the taxes we paid equaled about 34% of the price that you paid at the pump. And today, all those taxes add up to about 20% of the price that you pay at the pump. 6 months ago, I would have been able to say that all of those taxes add up to about 12% of the price of gasoline. But as you're aware, gasoline prices have dropped well over $1 just since last June, all in this state fiscal year. So when I talk about the taxes, and I talk about state, federal, and the state price-based taxes, they all add up to about 55 cents a gallon. If you add in the local taxes, you're maybe talking 65 cents a gallon. And this slide kind of puts all of that into perspective. So you're paying 55 cents a gallon on average when you go to pay taxes. Let's take a look at what you pay for other things that have become really part of our daily lives. If you have cable, and this is basic cable, not including HBO, the average package will cost you about $1,000 a year. A cell phone package with data, and this is for a single phone, $850 a year for your iPhone or your smartphone package. If you have multiple lines or your kids have phones, $800 would be a screaming deal. If you like to go to a national coffee chain, your choice, and you like to buy a large coffee every day, this is coffee, not espresso or the fancy drinks, you can pay almost $800 a year for coffee. Internet service, reasonable internet service, $540 a year. And all those taxes we talked about on gasoline for the average driver add up to $368 a year. That's 12,000 miles of driving in an average car. $368 in total taxes to fund the use of a multi-trillion-dollar transportation system. That's why this is my favorite chart. It helps to put it into perspective what we're talking about when we talk about taxes on transportation. So now that we have a pretty good idea of the scale of the taxes and how they work, I'd like to show a little bit about the history of our excise taxes. So these green bars in the bottom of this chart are equivalent to the very first, or perhaps the second chart that I started with that showed the history of the gas taxes since 1923. The green line that squiggles up and down is that tax rate adjusted for inflation. I've heard it said that the 50s and 60s were the heyday of highway construction. And I think this chart kind of indicates how that can be. The value of the tax, in this case I've indexed it to 1994 because that's the last time that the tax was increased. The value of the tax has been much greater than it is today, many times greater than it is today. And in fact, the value of the tax since 1994 has decreased about 65% since it was last increased in 94. So that's the purchasing power of that tax has dropped a considerable amount in that short period of time. Commissioner Medaffer mentioned 9-cent current value of that inflation-adjusted tax, and I think when I gave a similar presentation a year ago, that was the value. What you see now is an inflation-adjusted value of 7.8 cents per gallon.
Gonna have to change my elevator speech.
Unfortunately, it's not a happy change, but we've seen as the economy begins to gear back up again, considerable competition in the construction industry, and we're starting to see the cost of construction increase again. And I should mention this is based on the California Highway Construction Cost Index, which is very specific to the industry that this tax funds. If you also adjust, though, this is talking about inflation. If you also think about another topic that Commissioner Medaffer brought up, which is fuel economy, and you begin to adjust for fuel economy, you can see that the value of that tax is decreased to 6.8 cents per gallon. So as I move on with fuel economy, I'd like to talk about this chart here, which is showing the effects of fuel economy in the past and then moving forward. What this chart, this is a conceptual chart. You'll notice there's no numbers along the left-hand side of this chart. This is intended to show the impacts of increased fuel economy as we move forward. The line on the top, which I think is a reddish-orange line, is what vehicle miles traveled might be. It could be flatter, it could be higher, it could be lower. The red line is, of course, the actual the solid line is the actual history, the dotted line being whatever projection you wish to see in the future. If gas mileage never changed, if vehicles always got the same gas mileage, then revenues would keep pace with that line. They would grow at the same rate, and that's what this green line is intended to show. I think that's a Hummer. However, that's not what's happening. We know that already. You can kind of see divergence between the red line and the green line just since the early part of the century, where we're already seeing higher fuel economy, which means already using less fuel. And as we project going forward with more and more fuel-efficient vehicles, we're going to see this gap between use of the system and funding of the system get bigger and bigger going forward. And I'll throw this out, this little bit of trivia. In 1908, the first Model T Ford was made available to the public to purchase. The Model T Ford got 21 miles to the gallon. Didn't go very fast, and you couldn't tow a big boat with it, but it got 21 miles to the gallon. The average car on the road today gets 24 miles to the gallon, and a Ford F-150 gets much less than that. We've gone the other way for a long period of time. In the 70s, a car got 8 or 9 miles to the gallon. And now we're swinging the other way, and we're swinging the other way very fast. Government standards right now for a car being sold, depending on the size of the car, are right around 30 miles to the gallon, up to 35 miles a gallon for smaller cars. As we move forward, government standards for a car sold in 2029 will be almost 55 miles to the gallon. Okay? So as we move forward, we're going to see bigger and bigger gap between use and revenue. And finally, I'll throw this out. The average car on the road today that gets that 24 miles to the gallon is 11 and a half years old almost. The people who keep track of that number have indicated that's the biggest number they've ever seen. So we're going to see people starting to buy new cars as the economy's making them feel a little bit better. They're going to replace those old cars that get poor gas mileage with a new car that gets 35 miles to the gallon. And we're going to see divergence quite quickly moving forward. And with that wonderful piece of good news, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Well, that's quite the chart. Quite the charts. Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Keck? Any comments for Mr. Keck? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Let's move right along at this point, and now let's hear from Undersecretary of the California State Transportation Agency, Brian Annis. He's going to give us an overview of a recently released report that talks about road usage charge, and I like to just call it road charge because acronyms are crazy around this city, as really as an alternative to the gas tax. And These are things that were developed by the California Transportation Infrastructure Working Group. So with that, Secretary Yanis.
Sure. Well, good morning, Chairman Daffer and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to present this item. I believe in your agenda package you do have this white paper, which is called the California Transportation Infrastructure Priorities Workgroup White Paper, Exploring a Road Usage Charge as an Alternative to the Gas Tax. I'm going to speak about that and summarize that and talk to you a little bit about the process we use to develop that white paper. I'd like to start out, though, by telling you a little bit about the California State Transportation Agency. We're actually a newer agency in state government, part of Governor Brown's reorganization of state government in 2013, which was approved by the state legislature. We formed the Transportation Agency, and my boss, Secretary Brian Kelly, is a cabinet official. We have 3 large departments in our agency, the Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Highway Patrol, and we have 3 independent boards in our agency, the California Transportation Commission, the High Speed Rail Authority, and the Board of Pilot Commissioners that helps bring those large ships into the San Francisco Bay. I mention those in a sense to let you know that we do have resources available to you. We have certainly Caltrans that is a resource, but also the Department of Motor Vehicles, who of course currently collects some of the vehicle-related fees and taxes the state has. Even the Highway Patrol perhaps could be of benefit to the committee. They have procedures for privacy protection for some of the data collected on the highways. The California Transportation Infrastructure Priorities Work Group, if you allow me to call it CTIP. This was a advisory body formed in 2013 at the direction of the governor. He had mentioned in that year's budget proposal that the secretary should form a group to look at transportation priorities, realizing our needs are much greater than our current funding, and I believe also realizing that our needs are much greater than any probable new revenues we could be reasonably looking at. He directed the secretary to look at what might be our highest priorities for transportation expenditures and work to develop some pay-as-you-go revenue sources that might bring some new revenue into the system. As part of that effort, in January of 2014, we published a vision document that articulated some of our high-level priorities for the system, things such as integrated transportation system, linking our mass transit systems to each other, linking to airports, also an emphasis on fixing and operating our existing transportation infrastructure, our existing highways and roads in good condition. As we continued the work of that CTIP group into 2014, we decided to focus on 3 areas. One of them was, in fact, the road usage charge. We also looked at pricing and tolling on our state highways, and additionally we looked at our baseline funding program, the State Transportation Improvement Program, to see if that existing funding program was best directing our existing transportation dollars. The CTIP group is a large group of about 50 stakeholders in many areas. We do have public sector representatives. In state government, we have the Air Resource Board participating, Department of Finance. We've brought in county officials, Metropolitan Planning Organization officials, some representatives for cities. We also have user groups, the Trucking Association, AAA, as part of that group. We have some academics that are part of that group. We invited ledge staff to participate in our 2014 discussions. On the road usage charge specifically, that group met as a whole and as a subgroup, a smaller subgroup, about 5 times in 2014. At the conclusion of those meetings, we put together some recommendations, and through an anonymous text poll of those present, we asked our membership to vote to see if they endorse those recommendations. Of about 45 people voting, 42 of those endorsed the recommendations, either strongly agreeing or agreeing with the recommendations that group had put together. There were 3 dissenters, and I think that's important to note. Those that dissented weren't necessarily opposed as a policy direction, but they were skeptical on the feasibility of the public support, skeptical on the ease of collection, wanting to make sure this could be collected in an efficient way without a high sort of transaction cost to collect. So those are certainly issues that I think should be on the table, despite our endorsement of about 92% of those voting. Still, there are concerns, and I think those are things certainly you'll be looking at as you go forward. This group, as I understand, was somewhat independent from the author of the bill you heard about, SB 1077. I understand he decided to introduce that legislation before our group was formed, but I believe both efforts ended up being very complementary. We were able, through the process as an administration, to be better informed about the issue, and the author was gracious enough to work with us, and we were able to suggest some changes to the legislation, and as was stated, the governor did, of course, sign that bill, SB 1077. We, of course, also benefited from the work of Oregon and Washington, and we're informed by their efforts in developing the recommendations. Let me just briefly touch on a few of the recommendations. The work group developed recommendations in 3 areas. And for those of you that have the document, I'm looking at page 6 at the bottom. There's guiding policy principle framework. And these are recommendations to us. And again, I think you'll see a lot of overlap with Senate Bill 1077 and some of the direction of the legislation to this group. First of all, as today is demonstrating, one of the recommendations was to fully engage the public. This is as we found through our work groups, an area that's not well understood, and there are some misconceptions about how this would work. And clearly, this process will help engage the public and to both receive their input and hopefully also inform the public on some of the issues with a road usage charge. Number 2, honor personal privacy, and that was certainly a big part of 1077. Recommendation number 3 was that this be fair and equitable, that Californians should pay their fair share for the use of the transportation system. Issue 4 here was to keep pace with change. Technology is certainly changing quickly here, and we need to be cognizant of that and not develop a system that would be out of date from a technological perspective in a few years. I'm going to skip a few of these for speed here. Number 6, be simple. The system should be uncomplicated, streamlined, and transparent. So users should understand what they're paying and how that's collected and what their privacy protections are. Skipping down to number 11, allow user choice. This was something I'd have to say was informed by the Oregon example. In their work, they found that the public really wanted choice, and that offering users choice of different payment methods, the public acceptance went way up. And one of the options they offered was an option that did not include any kind of location-based data. 12, incorporate cost efficiencies. This is something would be, I guess, a greater concern if you went to a larger implementation, that the system should be easy to operate in terms of collection of the revenues. For the gas tax, that certainly is currently a streamlined collection process. There's a small set of distributors that tax is collected from, so the ease of collection, the ease of audit is much greater than you would be looking at when you have many times more payers. Lastly, we have the integration with other state policies. And there we list alignment with California's economic, energy, environmental, and congestion management goals. There is interest, we find, from our discussions in this type of approach from air quality advocates. This is seen as something that can benefit air quality, even if it's applied to the electric vehicles and the low-emission vehicles. The thought is that having a more direct link with usage and payment is something that will help on the air side, again, beyond any marginal change to those electric vehicle owners and all the incentives that are currently out there to purchase and use an electric vehicle. So those are recommendations of the group to the Secretary. And again, we hope those were helpful for the author in 1077 and also helpful to you as you consider some of the goals of the pilot program. Bottom of page 7, there were some characteristics of the pilot that the group recommended. First among those was geographic diversity, and I believe this overlaps with public outreach as well, that this pilot should be broad and not isolated in one area of the state. It should not be just urban and exclude rural areas of the state, etc. Duration was another issue. The group thought that, and was advised, I think, by some of the experience in Washington and Oregon, that this should probably go on for some period of months. Here the group thought it could take up to 12 months. There's, of course, efforts here to see where we can streamline and accelerate this process. So, perhaps that's something to take under consideration, but as a trade-off, if you will. The fourth item here was reporting options, and again, this gets to one of the points of the Oregon example of perhaps looking at various reporting options, and some may be technology-based, some may be non-technology-based. Lastly, sample size. The group thought a larger pilot would be beneficial to look at bring in more participants, and again, the larger the sample size, you're better able to have that geographic diversity, the urban-rural diversity, etc. So those were the general, more specific, and as well as more specific recommendations of the group. The group concluded really with a call to action. The group felt the current transportation funding structure is broken, but a road usage charge is a promising funding alternative that merits further exploration. So that concludes a summary of the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and certainly wanted to, on behalf of the Secretary, thank you for your public service on this committee.
Thank you very much, Brian. Anybody have any questions or comments for the report from Secretary Ennis? Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with being ahead of schedule. We were budgeting lunch at 12. We're 32 minutes ahead of schedule, which is a good thing. So what we can do is break for lunch now, and then we'll get into two outstanding presentations, some experiences both from the state of Washington with Rhea McGriffith, who's here, and also from Jim Whitty, who's here from the state of Oregon, to hear about what's gone on there. But before we do that, why don't we go ahead and break for lunch? And is everybody okay for an hour, or would that be okay? So let's reconvene this meeting in exactly 61 minutes at 12:30. So for right now, we'll take a break for lunch. Thank you.